Hi, and welcome to the I Ramble podcast. We're an entrepreneur-centric podcast, guiding you with some tried and true strategies from people that have taken their ideas from mental creation to reality. Now they're trying to make it easier for you to succeed in your endeavors. So sit back and listen to these entrepreneurs, builders, and designers share the step-by-step formulation of their business. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for new episodes. Enjoy!
Okay, so how's your day going, Miss Victoria?
Going well. And how about you?
It's going well. Thanks for asking. I appreciate that so much. All right. So, as I would always advise my guests, we're just trying to be mindful of anyone's feelings and thoughts. I don't want to censor any of your experience or anything you're going to share, anything you're going to go over. We just always want to be mindful because of the times we're in, and people are just a little different nowadays, and you know, trigger words and all of these different things. So we're always going to be mindful in that way. But I never want to censor your experience, because your experience is just that, your experience and what you've been through. And we're all about just giving guidance for the new ones, new entrepreneurs, new authors, new people who are just trying to start on their journey. So we never really want to censor anybody that way. We just like to just be mindful not to, for lack of a better word, just offend anyone, because, what we're trying to do is just give guidance. And then also, anyhow, we're going, as we're going along with the interview, if I skip anything that you feel is important or relevant, because this is about you more so than us, just feel free to, stop, interrupt, and say, hey, by the way, Kino, let me just share this. Let me tell you about this part of the program. I have no problem with that, because like I said, this is more about you being an author, motivation speaker, entrepreneur, and all these great things that you are. So feel free to always chime in and say, before, I jump to another question or what have you. Just always feel free to just say, hey, by the way, this, or by the way, that.
Sounds good.
All right. So we're going to get right into it. And I'm going to do the intro, and then we'll just get right into it. And okay. Then the intro go, what the business is. And you already know that's not a rhetorical question. That's a real question. What the business is. And today the business is diversity and inclusion. What is diversity and what is inclusion? It's just making sure everybody's included in the workplace. Everybody's included in the world. And we have diversity, good representation, so that we can be a good collective to help build and grow. Because that's what this is. We have no idea what this thing called life that we're doing. But one thing we do know is that it's about diversity, and it's all about inclusion. So I reached out to this lady to see if she can give us some guidance on that, because that's one of her strong points. She has a lot of strong points, but that's what we would really like her to kind of speak to today, and anything else that she'd like to really include, because diversity and inclusion. So I'm not going to do her any disservice. I'm just going to let her introduce herself. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Kino. Thank you. Thanks for having me here and for your audience.
It's our pleasure. And introduce yourself. Who are you? What's your name?
Yeah, so Victoria Pelletier is my name. You can blame my French-Canadian husband for the pronunciation of that one that gets butchered most of the time. I'm a lifelong corporate executive and entrepreneur. So I call myself an intrapreneur within the large organizations I work for, but I have also built and bought businesses. As you mentioned earlier, I'm an author. I do a lot of public speaking, and there are a number of things that I'm extremely passionate about and I advocate for, and are some of the topics I speak about on stages and in articles and media. And that is diversity, equity, inclusion being one of those.
Okay, fantastic. So you speak about your husband. So where are you from originally, and I don't know if you want to get into where you are now, but we're just going to get to your journey. So kind of your background, where are you from, and things like that.
So I'll go back earlier than talking about husband. So where I'm physically located in Miami Beach, I moved from New York a year and a half ago because I could. I was one of those people that fled the cold and came down here into the sun, which was great. However, you might hear the slightest bit of an accent, which will give me away as being originally from Canada. Only when I say a few words like out and about, they give me away. Otherwise, most people would generally not know that. Going back, I actually spend a lot of my time talking about kind of my origin story because it really influenced who I am and the drive that I've had, particularly from a professional standpoint and beyond. And a big part of diversity and inclusion is understanding people's lived experience and their why, right? So if anyone's followed Simon Sinek's Start With Why. And so I'll share my story so that, the audience can understand. I'm born to a drug addicted teenage mother who was extremely abusive to me. So I was in and out of care a number of times. I am fortunate, however, that I was adopted out into a loving family. So no physical abuse from my family going forward, only child. However, socioeconomically, I wouldn't say I did much, better in that. Well, I guess I should say better than certainly the very beginnings, but, born to or adopted by a family who was, lower middle class. My mom was a secretary. My dad was a janitor. And I remember my mom saying to me at some point, Tori, you need to do better than us. And knowing my biology and the roots that come from my biological mother and then socioeconomically, I was determined I was going to be better than either the biology or the circumstance I was born into. And so that informed pretty significantly my why and my drive, because the one thing I felt I was in somewhat control over was initially schooling and then my work. So I started working at age 11, became an assistant manager of a shoe store by 14, running, medical centers, in my later teens. And while I was in university and college, I worked for a bank and got promoted. Although I thought I was going to be a lawyer, I ended up loving the business world and became a COO at 24, president by 35, and CEO by 41. However, not taking lots of vacations, and, working 60, 80 hours or more a week, because again, that was one of the things I could control and I could, show up in a very certain way. So that's a lot around that kind of the personal side, at least the early stage, that just I share with you and your listeners to understand. That's a big part of what's driven me and propelled me forward from a corporate and career perspective.
That's good stuff. But one of the number one takeaways I got from that was that you didn't let your situation define you, and you were able to just kind of power through it. And I'm kind of curious to know what was your frame of mind that gave you that power, that courage, and that strength to even overcome all of those things and stay focused with the level of success that you were able to gain.
I think that we all have choice, and there's a couple of mantras and philosophies for me. One of them is around no excuses, which drives my children insane when I say that. But we have a choice. We're all going to deal with challenges and obstacles or adversity, and we choose how to respond to that. Stuff can still happen and the tears might still flow, but how we choose to move forward. And so for me, the other mantra is unstoppable. The name of my book, the pop socket had made for the back of my phone. And so my mindset was that I wasn't going to let any of those things stop me. I set a goal for myself. And early on, it was and as a child, I was going to be better than Julie. That's my biological mother. I was going to do more, and I was going to do things differently, as I knew I always wanted to have children. So even as it, came to being a parent, and it came to work, seeing my parents, they declared bankruptcy at, when I was in my teens, just seeing their challenge. So the choice I chose to make for myself was to work as hard as I could with the things I could control. And as you said, not to let circumstance define me. And so I developed not always, I'm going to say, a healthy level of being resilient. I was kind of hardened and tough for a lot of years. I had to learn how to be a little bit more vulnerable, but I've subsequently learned how to have a much healthier view on being resilient and keeping myself focused on goals and objectives ahead of me.
Okay. And let's get into schooling. Was that anything that you learned in school, or was that something that you kind of, I'm a strong believer in manifesting. So when you keep a positive mental, you like you said, you wasn't going to be like your mom. You wasn't going to be like, those examples you had before. You were just going to focus on being strong and overcoming. So was that something that just was an inner drive, or was that something that you learned along the way in the long term?
I'm supportive that I had a very, very, large cheerleader in my mother. My mom is the woman that adopted me. And so, she drove me to understand the feelings and emotions I had and to get me in a more positive mindset. One, in school, school was not a positive experience for me in that sometimes I wonder where it comes from, because when I tell you about my biological mother, but I was gifted in school and I later skipped 2 grades. And at a time, however, when being smart in school didn't seem to be so popular. So, being called the teacher's pet, being bored at school and advancing. So those issues, plus you can't see me through the, as we, sit on video and can see each other, but I'm 5'8", which isn't exceptionally tall for a woman. But when I was at age
shorter than you, so that's really not acceptable for a man.
Well, but I grew so quickly. I hit this height by the time I was 11. So not only was I like the teacher's pet and the smart one in class who later skipped, I was also physically advanced. So school for me was like a horrible experience, and I was happy to get through it as fast as I could.
Okay. So let's move a little bit past that now, right? So you're out of school. I wanted to get into kind of your entrepreneur journey, but I really wanted to know, okay, when did you get that focus that say, okay, this is my path, this is what I want to do? When was your aha moment where, okay, this is me, Victoria, this is what I'm going to do?
Well, so I started working at 11, as I said earlier, and that was because my parents didn't have a lot of money. And so, they provided certainly all the basics for me. I certainly didn't grow up in a household where, I was worried about whether there would be food on the table. But if I wanted, a new pair of jeans or anything, quite frankly, outside of the basics, I needed to buy it. So I think I started working for those reasons initially, and quickly, I thrived in it. I knew I was like, oh, I could do this and I can do well. And the harder I worked, the more I could accumulate for myself, although I saved and I bought my first house at 19. But I also did well. And so for me, I didn't have an immediate aha moment while I was working in like my very youth. The aha moment for me, there's probably been a few of those. So I graduated high school at 16. So I was in, college and graduated by 20. And I worked throughout in a bank. And by the way, I've always had one or more jobs, even when I was in college. And I wanted to be a lawyer. And, the first aha moment for me was the bank that I worked for through college relocated me across country and gave me a promotion opportunity into a leadership role. And I thought, I'm just going to take a year off and then I'll go back to school and I'll go to law school. And it turned out like I realized I loved what I was doing. I loved the corporate world and I loved leading people because I was put in a position of leadership. So that was kind of aha moment one for me. And then the second was I mentioned that I became chief operating officer of a company at age 24. So it was a stretch role for me. I needed to lean pretty deeply into the things I knew I did well, which was predominantly running large operations and call center operations at the time. but I hadn't previously led technology, led HR, led our sales or marketing team. So I needed to learn some of those things. That was another moment for me where I stepped out of a company who I worked at for 6 years. That was relatively safe. Not that there's any real job security, but I felt pretty comfortable and respected there to move and take this massive risk. At age 24, I was a new mother into a role where I didn't know everything. There was some real imposter syndrome there. So those were two really big ones for me from a career perspective. And I can share more on the entrepreneurial side because I've built and bought businesses as well. And I think that's just kind of in my DNA somehow.
Yeah, and I so appreciate that, because what we are with iRamble, we're just trying to give guidance to new entrepreneurs, whatever your venture is, because principles overlap and they're tried and true principles that someone have done it before. And we're just trying to give you some of those so you can kind of implement them, whether you're, getting into banking, getting into, opening a nail salon, whatever it may be. They're just tried and true principles that if you just adhere to. And one of the number one things that I'm hearing from you, that's kind of why I harp on it, was your level of discipline coming from where you came from, that you were able to not just overcome, but just stay so disciplined, because that's one of the number one things that people lack in terms of trying to build, overcome, and things like that. They want to not necessarily be an overnight success, but just don't understand the fact that it takes time, it takes some patience, it takes some hard work. And it just seemed like you were just able to get those tools, implement them with such seamlessness that it just was fantastic. So that's kind of why I harp on that, because that's one of the number one things. And I want these new entrepreneurs, new business owners, and just listeners to just know, you may mess it up overnight, but it might take a couple of days, years, and weeks to get it back to where you kind of want it to be. So that was real fantastic. And I really appreciate that fact. And I'm just so glad that you were able to overcome those things and get to the point that you was on. So after 24, you're now into banking. You're there. What's the next step for you? What were you thinking? And I really want to get into women empowerment, because the diversity-ish side of it and all of those great things. But I really love your story, and I really like to take it step by step into your elevation and journey. But I really do love that side of it, because I have a daughter. She's in college, and I love the fact that, I'm somewhat reserved. You may not know, even though I'm doing a podcast, but I'm a semi-hermit personality. But I love the fact that she's stepping out and, venturing with her friends and growing and things like that. So I really love the women empowerment, the women inclusion side of it, because back in the days it was not so. And we're just in a different time now where it's just understood that you cannot exclude, you cannot diminish, and you cannot look down upon women in the workplace or anywhere else. They can build, grow, and elevate just like anyone else. So after 24 now, what's your next step? What's the next elevation in your growth?
So that step from banking was into COO for an outsourcing organization. It was just sort of in the early days when companies were looking to outsource to save money and or things that they weren't what I call their superpower. So, for the entrepreneurs listening to this, there's things that are your superpowers in terms of the products or services that you're offering. And then there's stuff that you either as a founder and CEO aren't going to be the expert at, or parts of your business. So outsourcing, your finance and accounting, or outsourcing some of your technology and those sorts of things. So I stayed in that world of outsourcing a variety of different slices. And so I progressed in the world of business to business professional services. So providing consulting and outsourcing services to other companies. And I kept moving progressively, maybe not always in terms of title. It could have been a lateral move or similar scope and responsibility, but to companies that were larger or that had a different client set. So I moved from there to a competitor of that company, but it was much larger. And Microsoft was one of our largest clients. where I learned much more about the world of technology and technology outsourcing as we provided their support to them. And then another point I shifted, I got recruited to run the shared services for a corporate travel company. So I spent about a decade running corporate travel businesses. If you work for a company and, they outsource their travel arrangements to a third party provider. And so I worked for a number of those companies, including American Express, that has a very large corporate travel company. And I led their US enterprise portfolio. And then I ended up investing in buying a data and analytics, a technology company, initially as an investment. I thought it was a phenomenal platform that the woman I bought it from had built, but I saw so much potential with it. And I ended up running it for a year, which wasn't the intent, while I was just transitioning from one company to another. And that was a great launching pad for me to learn. I built some smaller businesses up into maybe, $500,000 or $1 million in revenue, but to have then, bought a business that was much more established and grow it. It was phenomenal. So then I, now do a lot of coaching to startups. In particular, I spent a lot of time actually there's an organization called CEO that funds female founders as well. And whether that's with money directly or, even just giving them some coaching and insight. So there's a little bit more Kino on the journey post 24 COO.
Okay. So when did you decide that you wanted to take on a leadership aspect in terms of coaching and guidance? Was that something that you always knew you wanted to do, or did you kind of, let's not say fall into it, or you just knew that was a natural path based on where you were?
I think it wasn't necessarily something that I had on my sort of, you talked about sort of, visioning and manifestation. It's not something that I had sort of out there for myself. What it was a result of me being put in a position to lead others and recognizing that as, I rose in organizations or moved, we needed to build the next generation of talent. And so I was often asked to start to mentor or coach other people that were, maybe, levels down below for me. So it came as a result of that. It came through many larger organizations have what are called either business or employee resource groups. And that's often, taking a segment of underrepresented, whether it's the LGBT, whether it's women, there's business or employee resource groups for people of color. Like they have all these different groups. And then so coming in as an executive to share my story and being asked to help coach. So that's where it initially stemmed from. And then I realized how much I enjoyed doing it. At the end of the day, I think of, on my tombstone, which actually there won't be one, but on the proverbial tombstone, I don't want there to be, talk of, the revenue that I brought in for the current company I'm working for, or how many mergers and acquisitions I've been a part of. I want my legacy to be around the impact I've had on others and on, everyone that hopefully I come in contact with. So not just from a work perspective and the clients that I serve, but within my community. And transparently, it feels really good to help others and recognize that there's something I can share. The lessons I'm 46 now, and I think of the lessons I wish my 20-something-year-old self could have learned. Would I have listened to me? I don't know. But I feel like if there's anything I can do to share, some of, my path and some of the failures I've had and the lessons I've learned from it with others, that in itself brings me great joy. And that's part of why I continue to do it.
That's good. I love country music. My dad played it every Sunday. And that takes me back to a song that it said, if I could write a letter to me, back when I was maybe about 16 or whatever the song was. But he was just basically writing a song. If he can talk to himself back then, he would say all of these things, hoping that they would kind of trigger a moment of, okay, all right, this is what I would do in this situation, just to kind of make their timeline go a little bit better and smoother, because now he was writing from hindsight while you were living in the moment. hoping that you were just intelligent enough in the moment to make the best decisions when you know those decisions are just really forks in the road. And I decided to do this and I'm going this way and that way with it. But that's kind of this part of this progression in life. And that's one of the things that I really thought about when you were speaking about your upbringing and growing is we as parents have a duty to educate our children with the best decision and the best guidance possible, knowing that it's up to them to make the choice. But if we don't give them the proper guidance based on our experience, then they will tend to deviate more so than not. So that's one of the thing that I really love with your story and with the things that you're sharing with us. Relationship building and branding. So how one of the number one things I love to talk with entrepreneurs about is networking. You just can never undervalue the importance of networking. And like I said, I have somewhat of a reserved personality. So sometimes I may go to a function and I'm kind of over here when really I need to be over there networking. So I always try to give the guidance, even if I may not do that. I just know the importance of giving it to you so you can implement that in what you're doing. But let's speak about that, and not just in terms of branding. So you can take it both ways, get into the branding side of it and just get into just the importance of networking just in general.
Yeah, I attribute a significant portion of my career success beyond performance and maintaining my skills and the work ethic I've had to developing a very, very strong personal brand and by extension, the network. And so what I would say on that is I tell everyone, and I actually deliver like a speech on this and do a lot of coaching, that, we are all the CEOs of brand you, as individuals. And so that means you are in control of the narrative. Your brand is what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. And it's more than what I find people, get caught up and think that their brand is their job title and the organization they work for. When we think of a business, like your brand from a business perspective. And I say, you are so much more than that. So your expertise, whether functionally, if you're an accountant, let's say, like functionally, you can be the best tax accountant and maybe even known for doing work in a particular industry or a particular area. Well, that's great. But then when someone's looking for an accountant, why would they choose you versus another? And it's the other elements of it. So your brand is, yes, your subject matter expertise that you have, but it's also about who you are as an individual. If you're a leader, who are you as a leader? What kind of environment and culture do you build for your employees? Are they engaged? Would they follow you? But I also think it's about the life story. So I tell people around personal brand, it's, your lived experience that informs and it builds connections with other people as well. So I encourage people to, even if you're reserved like yourself, to, figure out how to tell more of that story, because again, you're this whole person. And I think that's a misconception many people make in trying to separate the two. And if COVID and the pandemic didn't teach us these last couple of years that there's really not a separation, we're all working from our homes, right? We engage with people and we had the, opportunity to see, literally into people's home lives as well as they're working, then I don't know what does. So one, curating, and authentic. When I say curate, I don't mean we're not creating a false narrative, but, build a more holistic narrative of who you are much more holistically and how you show up, and don't create a separation. So that would be one. Two is then what do you choose to do with that? So whether it's as an entrepreneur or if you happen to be in a big corporation, to, be promoting the brand, because things happen and people lose jobs and you need to build it well in advance of when you actually need it. And you might be job searching or as an entrepreneur looking for new clients. And then the next on the networking piece is much like not creating a separation of brand between who you are, personally and some of your interests with professionally. Same thing with the network, is recognizing that it's important to approach networking from a very organic standpoint. That business that I bought, I coached the woman I bought it from. I coached her daughter at hockey. Again, I said I'm Canadian, so that's playing hockey is not. So, our daughters played together, and it was very, very unexpected. We obviously met at the hockey arena, and then we clicked and we went and we had lunch. And 6 months later, I was buying one of her companies. And so come at it from a very organic perspective. And so even if you're somewhat shy, it can be in an elevator, looking at someone, smiling. LinkedIn is amazing because you can have what I call electronic courage. So until you gain, a little bit more comfort, you can do it from behind a screen and connect with people that way. And then the second part is to be really strategic and intentional around building a network. So, if you're looking to gain access to a prospective client or in someone who works there who might buy your products or services, if you're looking for a job, then do the homework around that and then be really intentional. There's this great book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And he talks a lot more around the strategic intentionality and how to follow up and those sorts of things. So it's a long-winded way to your answer, on both brand and network, but those are some of the things I've learned and would recommend.
No, I believe it. No such thing as a long-winded way around, because you gave great guidance and great information. And one of the things I love what you said was electronic confidence, because we're in the age of, connecting with people miles away, different countries and things like that. So that kind of help a lot of people who are reserved in terms of their personality or what have you, to build up that courage or whatever it takes to kind of get to the end result or the goal they're trying to accomplish. So you answered it on both levels, and that was fantastic. Diversity and I guess a bit of equity and what have you. I think those are kind of two things. So what would you say about diversity in the workplace? Because let's say pre-COVID, because now a lot of people are now empowered to be able to work from home, where they're no longer, at the cubicle, the office, or what have you. But pre-COVID, diversity was somewhat of an issue. Do you feel like we've gotten to the corner, turned the corner, or somewhere near the corner in any of that realm?
I think we're very far from it. And I'll speak much more from I'll say North American perspective, because it means very different things in other parts of the world, right? So I think of a country like India, it's much more about gender and class system versus other elements. But in North America, from a gender perspective, we still have a very, very far way to go. In fact, a report recently showed from an equity perspective, particularly, at a senior level, we've still probably got another, at the current rate and pace, another 60 years before women hit parity. And when you look at the number of female CEOs or board members, it's atrocious, let alone then you start to look at other dimensions like people of color. And so I think there's incredible awareness and an attempt to build programs and drive it forward, but we're still a long way away from it. And also because there's a focus on hiring diverse talent, but in many cases, they're running out the back door as quickly as they entered the front, because there's not as much of a focus on building the right kind of culture internally that gives opportunity to those individuals or creates an environment for them to feel like they belong.
Okay. And then what do you feel is the, I don't want to say the fix, obviously, because like we said earlier, it doesn't get bad overnight. But what do you think are some roadmaps or some kind of paths or directions we can take to kind of get to that, overcoming that hurdle of what was the issue in the first place?
I think I have a favorite phrase. You heard me talk about intentionality when it comes to networking, the absolute same thing from a diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI perspective. And so I think I spend a lot of time talking to like executives and, as part of my day job, if you will, coaching them on these things. And there's not a silver bullet. And so, again, hiring talent is just diverse talent is one piece of it. So, and if we're truly going to progress, we need to be incredibly strategic around what's the program we want to build much more holistically and be really intentional. And those are things like, education for the entire organization about bias and unconscious bias that exists, to create awareness around that and create training programs to be really intentional around building not only performance measurement systems, but equity type programs to create opportunities to drive advancement for women and for LGBTQ or veterans and, African Americans, let's say, within the organization, to teaching our leaders to be way more like human centric and empathetic, and making sure everyone feels comfortable and it's safe to show up their authentic selves in the workplace. One thing I will say is I struggle with, but it's an incredibly intentional move to drive it forward. I struggle with, incenting leadership and organizations to do the right thing. So for example, to, connect our bonuses to our performance and diversity. The reason I have a problem with it is because I don't think we should be receiving a bonus for doing the right thing. But the reality is
what could be a merit, not necessarily a merit system? What can make it be a vested interest?
Well, I think leaders need to understand that doing the right thing is good for business. And so what I hear from some is, it's going to cost a lot to create this program or to do this. And then they fear as though that's somehow a trade-off between profitability and long-term prosperity of their business. And so we need to get in the mindset that, taking, these initiatives towards, diversity and inclusion, it could be around sustainability, all of these elements, it's actually a really good thing for business. So let's stop looking at it myopically as a, cost for creating this program versus the long-term benefit it gains by employees being more, it's proven that, an inclusive diverse and inclusive environment, there's generally more innovation. Employees are happier, therefore more productive and engaged. Therefore, that actually does deliver, results to the bottom line. It costs less because you're not having to, hire so many people to do recruitment and, and train them all over again as new people come into the organization.
Okay. What I was thinking too, depending on the size of the company or what have you, would it be, I don't want to just say conducive, but would it behoove the company to hire someone that teaches those kind of principles as a natural employee, just like you'll hire someone if you work in an accounting firm to be an accountant. You take one less accountant away to hire not necessarily, let's say, a therapist or an associate or someone of yourself who can give these guidance. Would it behoove them to hire somebody who can consistently impart those guidance on the company for growth?
Absolutely. So again, as you said, depends on the company size, but many, mid to large size organizations now have a chief diversity officer, right? That's the person that's accountable for reporting, on the progress, the baseline, and then the ongoing progress around diversity and inclusion in the workplace and developing programs, and then bringing in people that are experts in certain areas. So yes, I wouldn't expect that person needs to deliver all of the, unconscious bias training or other elements of it, but they're the ones that are going to be that, point person to bring people in as needed for the organization to move them forward.
Okay. And then as you speak, you talk about the change in just how the overall culture of your particular company or business, or is it a blanket cultural change that you're kind of adhering to or alluding to in that? Is it a business change in the culture, or is it just a change in how you train your staff?
So I actually believe that a company culture is the outcome of many different things. So I think some companies think, oh, we'll put up like this mission statement in terms of what our culture is. No, that's great. That's aspirational though. The real culture comes from, being clear on the organization's, purpose and mission, and, aligning people in the right roles and ensuring that the policies and the procedures, are aligned, and you've got leaders who talk, act, and behave in a way, that is inclusive, that is a responsible leader, more modern leader. All of those things done well, that is what brings, a positive, company culture, not just putting up a statement on a wall.
So it typically starts from the owner, CEO, or whatever, down to the employees. So do you think more training need to happen with the owners and the CEOs and the staff and the head honchos, boss, or whoever, so that they can kind of trickle that down in their character and their behavior? Or is it just once a week, once a month, we're going to have what they call it? Man, what was that word? Just a group meeting, a team meeting.
Yeah, no, it needs to be consistent. Time. So I think the question, over like, is it from the top down? It's both, quite frankly. So, I mean, it stems from founder, CEO.
That was the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Down. I mean, they need to be, really clear. Like, this is ideally, here's the, culture that we're aspiring towards. And yes, there's business goals and objectives, and how do these all come together? But that message and that leadership and that approach needs to come all the way down. But at the same time, I'm a big believer that everyone's a leader, regardless of their title or the hierarchy, right? Our voice is our power. So when, a frontline employee sits there and sees something that is not acceptable in terms of treatment of another, they can help, make a change by being vocal and bringing that forward. And then it's like, we can't say that we're going to have this positive culture where, everyone's going to feel they can be themselves and come in and then accept really crappy behavior by another person. So I have an experience where I worked in one company and, leading one part of the business, and someone who didn't report up through me, a peer who ran part of a sales organization, was extremely toxic, speaking down to people, telling them they, weren't worth the air and his like business development dollars. He was in like horrific things he told people, and the swears and whatever. And so, I mean, it was escalated to a multitude of people within the organization. And just because he was a high performing salesperson, they kept him. And I mean, that for me, we can't espouse to be really focused on building this great inclusive culture and be okay accepting that kind of behavior. And in this case, from someone fairly senior within the organization. So
accountability.
Hey, we need to be living it every day. It's not in the weekly team meeting or a town hall, every day.
So speak to accountability then. How can we remedy that side of it? Because that's kind of what you're speaking to. I did a interview with someone. I don't want to get too in depth with that, but they were speaking to someone who kind of were their supervisor, let's just say, but they felt they had their point was right more so than the fact that their supervisor gave them an instruction to adhere to. So if they just disobeyed, their supervisor, the fact that they were right in what the end result might be was okay. So accountability is something that need to be consistent and adhere to as well. So how can we, not just in the corporate world, small business, either way, because they kind of overlap, how can we implement accountability where it's either, I reprimand you once, I reprimand you twice, and, what can I do after this? You're just going against corporate culture or against our business allowance or, things we allow to represent our brand.
Well, it's not just about accountability. Some of what we're talking about takes courage, right? I think of, the challenge that, my leader in that example I gave, I remember going to her and saying, like, this person, and she was aware there were multitude of complaints through HR and beyond that had come to her. And she didn't have the courage.
Okay.
And so I think there's accountability to our teams to say, I have said, I'm going to create this. I want to have a great environment that we all work in.
Okay.
Accountability is to have a conversation with that individual, say it's not acceptable, and then go and have a conversation with my leader. Unfortunately, I would say she didn't have the courage to stand up to a whole lot of other people in that organization to say it's time for us to address this individual and let him go. So it's accountability, Keto, but it's also courage to do what's right.
I agree with you 100%. And I think what happens is, I think it equates back to because we don't know why we're here. So we're kind of scared of the next. So we don't do what's right now because we're thinking, hey, it might get me to that next quicker than you. And then in cancel culture and all of these different things. So it's the accountability and also the courage to stand up and say, hey, listen, this is not correct. And whether you fire me, let me go, and call all the other companies and say, hey, don't hire me, whatever the case may be. I just know for the courage of my character or the conviction of my character and what I believe is right, I'm just going to say this in spite of. So you just said that just so fantastically. And you spoke about, also I wanted to talk about personal branding or brand-based selling. What do you mean by that per se?
So people do business with people they like and they trust. Therefore, they want to do business with them. And so this is where, going back to the conversation around your brand is more than your job title or in the company you work for. And so, establishing a brand and who you are and how it's going to be to work with you. So part of my brand is my advocacy around diversity and inclusion, that I'm really focused on leadership and culture. I have a high degree of accountability and commitment and follow through to my clients. And so that's all part of my brand. And that, one, two, there's connecting with people, not just because we might do the same thing or a customer might need to buy what it is that my team could deliver for them. I want them to do business because they know who I am as a leader, who I am as a, business person, and I'm going to deliver to them because my word is everything, and my reputation. And so delivering to them. But then I also hope that, we start to have a dialogue and the word partner gets thrown around all the time, like, oh, we're true, business partners. And, well, that for me means something. And hopefully that means that we don't need to be friends, but ideally I want to and I want them to enjoy working with me. So I'm going to learn more. I'm going to take time to learn about their family. I'm going to take time to learn about their hobbies and what they did in the weekend. And I find that is one of the best ways to establish and build and grow relationships and ultimately your business. Now, does it take time to do that? Yes. But then you're likely to have them as a client for life, assuming you still have a reason to be doing business together.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fantastic. I heard that from another, someone that gave me great advice. And they say whenever they go to a function and meeting and things like that, they make it their personal point to know all of these people who he's going to interact with, their kids, what their hobbies are, what they're into, so that when they're having conversation, they can say, oh, hey, how about such and how about this? Because you're showing them that you're going above and beyond and caring about what matters to them. So those are just good business practice that if you want to get your business to the next level, or if it matters to you that you get to the next level, you just kind of implement these things. If you want to stay surface level, then the person that you're interacting with may not value you more, as Victoria was going to come in and say, hey, how was your golf game yesterday? Your kid's soccer game went well. You put in that work to know that these are the things that matter to them and these are the things that they're doing. So that goes a long way into it as well. So I didn't want us to not finish without talking about your author and your book and things that you got going on and what matters to you most. So let's speak about that.
Sure. Well, I co-authored a book. The plan's to write a full book on my own. The book is called Unstoppable. So when I heard the publishers said that, I'm like, well, that's my philosophy in life. So I definitely need to be a part of it. So I co-authored that, and it talks a little bit about my journey and some of my lessons. But really, that was a launching pad for me to continue to get the word out about me as a public speaker. Although that isn't my full-time job, that's my side gig or hustle, which my employer did approve, by the way, when I joined. That brings me joy. And so that's kind of the launching pad and why I spend a lot of time, doing media and being involved in podcasts. One, I love to do it. I love to share my story, but ultimately I also really love standing on stages in front of large audiences and then connecting with them afterwards.
So let's get into that just a quick bit too. You came from, your upbringing, this, that, and the third. What brought you to that stage? What gave you that, not just I have a story to share, but obviously you hear a lot of people that give you these tips on how to not be nervous on stage, picture the audience this way, and all of these different things. But it has to be a drive, a love, a passion of what you're trying to convey that supersedes all of those things in terms of nervousness.
Well, so I actually took acting classes when my mom put me in modeling when I was a kid. She thought I was shy. You hear me and I'm pretty extroverted now, but I was fairly shy as a teenager. And because I was so tall, my mom put me in modeling, but it sort of led its way into acting. And I took a course in university and I loved it. And then I did some professional acting for a few years. So I had a comfort standing on stages. However, I was always playing someone else. So when I started to, do speeches for work, I was actually pretty uncomfortable not being in front of an audience, but I wasn't playing another character. It's me. And so actually I gained more confidence when I started to share my story. And it brought together a love of a few different things. So I really have always enjoyed when I was acting, although I did like television commercials, and I enjoyed being on stage because you could sort of see the reaction from the audience. That in itself is pretty exciting and energizing, one. And then two, I talked about why I got into, coaching and mentoring and sort of the joy it brings me in helping others and sharing a message and life lessons. And so I bring those together now, and particularly as I got more confident sharing my own story, because I think it will help others. I bring it all together on stages and just feel the energy in the room in a lineup, often from people who want to talk to me afterwards. And that just brings me like such joy that's why I do it.
So what was the first one like?
Oh, I've been speaking for so long. The first time I was doing it, it was probably like an industry, like very business topic focus. So,
semi-comfort.
Yeah. So, I'm always a believer, like if you're going to do it, make sure you understand your content, first, and it should be more of a conversation than anything quite scripted. But even though I had stood on stages and performed, it took time. I always say that you need to lean into the things that make you uncomfortable. And over time, it will get much more natural and a lot less uncomfortable. So I did that to the point where now I have almost no fear. You could throw me anywhere and I'd be good with it.
All right. So what's the next book? How can they reach you? How can they support the first book? And how can they get you for speaking of engagement and things of that nature, Victoria?
It will probably be another like Unstoppable. It was Unstoppable Change Makers Who Dare to Make a Difference. It'll probably just be an Unstoppable as the name of the full one. And I will tell a much broader, longer story, a little bit of which I've shared with your audience today. So that'll be the next step book wise. they can find me at your listening audience at victoria-pelletier.com. Hopefully that'll be in, the listener notes. Just Google me, because I think I'm probably most of the first 10 pages or so that come up on there.
Okay. All right. Is there anything that we didn't get into that you kind of like to speak on and, let the people know? And what advice would you have for people who is trying to get into not just motivational speaking, but just women in corporate world or entrepreneurship, starting a business, just advice that you would give based on, what you've been through and what you learned?
Well, there's a million things I'd probably give as advice. I've probably shared some of the, the ones I'd put at the forefront today around brand, around networking, around performance and work ethic, around having choice in how you move forward. But the other thing I would say is I have this saying, and my kids now have it down pat: you don't ask, you don't get, right? So if you want it, whether it's to start a new business, you want that, advancement in your career, you want to take on some additional responsibility, then just ask for it. You want to get that networking meeting. We are in control of our choice and our career and how we move forward. And so to be bold and unwavering in going for what we want.
Okay, that's fantastic, and that's great advice too as well. Because if you want that responsibility and you ask for it, I always tell people, don't be afraid of what you wish for. Be prepared for it, because you're going to get it. Just be prepared for it. So when you ask for those responsibilities, just know that you're going to take care of them. You're going to do what needs to be done with it. So kind of do your research and just be ready for the responsibility that you're asking to be put upon you. And I just truly appreciate all that you conveyed and all the sentiments, because I couldn't ask for more, to tell you the truth. I didn't have to ask you too many questions. You kind of answered all my notes that I written down. So I was trying to stretch and find, but you just conveyed so much in terms of just your story and what you were saying. It was fantastic, Victoria, and I really do appreciate you rambling with us and allowing us to ramble with you. And I would love to do a follow-up and love to find out, what you have going on next in the upcoming months or so, or what have you. And like I said, is there anything else you just, like to convey, or did we kind of elaborate as much as we needed to at this point in time?
We covered a lot. On my website, I post all of the content that I write and the articles. So there's lots there.
And spell it out and let us know what your website is.
Sure. It's Victoria-Pelletier, which is spelled PELLETIER.com.
.com. And we thank you so much, Victoria. We do appreciate you taking the time for letting us ramble with you, asking you all these great questions and picking your brain and giving guidance to the next ones that's coming up, be it author, be it motivational speaker, and being just a woman in leadership and all of those great things. We really do appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you.
It's been our pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's Ramble. Please like, share, and subscribe for new episodes of the iRamble podcast. Also, check out iRamble.com for more guest content.